Is it strange, running into your old classmate after all these years? I looked at her once. Slowly. Strange. I said. No. The best kind of surprise I've had in a long time. She smiled, warm, unhurried, and slid the cup gently across the counter toward me. Then I hope you make coffee as well as you give compliments. Stay a while, I said, reaching for the cup. You can judge for yourself. She settled onto the bar stool, crossed her ankles, and opened her book. I was planning to, she said. I turned back to the espresso machine, smiling. Before we begin, has someone ever walked back into your life and reminded you exactly what a good morning is supposed to feel like? Leave it in the comments, hit subscribe, and let's begin. My name is Everett. I am 27 years old. I say that simply, but behind those words are 3 years I would describe differently if I could. 3 years of waking up in the same city, walking into the same job, and telling myself it was temporary, that something was about to change, that my real life was about to begin. I run the coffee bar at a small bookstore cafe in Charleston, South Carolina, a warm, salt-aired city where the summers arrive early and stay long. The shop is called Tidewater Books. From the outside, it is easy to miss. A pale blue door, a hand-painted sign, window boxes full of petunias going soft at the edges by the end of summer. But inside it is genuinely good, old paper and fresh espresso wrapped together, a ceiling fan turning slow no matter the heat, shelves packed tight enough that you have to angle your shoulders to move between them. The owner, Mrs. Patton, comes in on Tuesdays. The rest of the time it is just me. 3 years ago, I was a student. Literature department, University of the South, Sewanee, Tennessee. I loved what I was doing, reading, arguing with professors, writing essays I actually cared about. I had friends, a schedule, a version of the future that made sense. Then the money ran out, circumstances piled up, and I left before finishing. I told myself it was temporary. That was 3 years ago. There are things I do not tell customers across the counter. For instance, that my father died that same semester, quietly and suddenly, a heart attack on an ordinary Tuesday. Or that after his death, it became clear our family had been held together entirely by his quiet strength, and without him, everything that had seemed stable began to come apart. My mother closed herself off. My younger brother Nate, 16 at the time, started looking for an exit in places that had none. I came home because there was no one else. I do not regret it. But sometimes, when I unlock Tidewater Books at 10 in the morning and start the espresso machine and the first slant of June's sun falls across the shelves, I stand there and think, where did the Everett go who was going to write something that mattered? There is usually no answer. There is only the coffee and the first customers of the day. Most days are steady and forgettable. Then the first Friday of June came, and the bell above the door rang. I did not look up right away. I was sorting new arrivals behind the counter, a stack of crime novels, a few volumes of poetry, one heavy hardcover that nobody would ever buy, but Mrs. Patton loved. Then something made me look. Instinct, or maybe just a pause between movements, I am not sure. She was standing in the doorway, looking at the shelves the way people do when they actually read. Unhurried, certain, as if the books were old acquaintances who deserved a proper greeting. I recognized her before she even looked up. Eden. We had been in the same American literature seminar, junior year, fall semester. She sat 2 rows ahead of me and argued with the professor about Fitzgerald in a way that made the whole class lean forward without meaning to. She never raised her voice, never pushed. She just spoke with such precision that disagreeing felt like hard work. I used to listen to her and think, that is someone who knows exactly what she wants. Now she was 27, same as me. She had walked in out of the warm June morning wearing a light white linen skirt, simple but somehow perfect, the kind of fabric that breathes in the heat, and a blouse the color of seafoam, with a small open collar and the sleeves rolled to the elbow. Her hair was light, almost the color of wheat, pinned up in a neat knot at the back of her head with a few loose strands at the temples that looked entirely intentional. Over one shoulder, she carried a canvas bag with the outline of a book pressing through the fabric. She had not seen me yet. I stood behind the counter with a damp rag in my hand and did nothing for about 10 seconds. Just looked. Then I said, Eden? She turned. That pause, the kind where someone is sorting through years and faces all at once, lasted exactly as long as it needed to. Then her expression opened up. Surprise and something warmer arrived at the same time. Everett. She said it the way you say a name you had not expected to need, but are quietly glad to find. You work here? I run the coffee bar, I said. You want something? She smiled. Black coffee. And whatever you recommend for Southern Gothic that isn't Faulkner. I made her coffee. I handed her a worn copy of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, our city, after all, and set a confederacy of dunces on top as a joke. Our fingers overlapped on the spine for just a second. She took both books, found a chair by the window, and stayed for 2 hours. When she left, the shop felt noticeably quieter, but I did not know then that she would come back, and that when she did, she would bring with her not just an empty cup and a finished book, but something from the past that we had both believed was long since closed. She came back the following Tuesday. I was wiping down the espresso machine when the bell rang, and I looked up, and there she was, same canvas bag, different blouse, this time a soft coral that caught the morning light in a way I noticed, and then told myself I had not noticed. Her hair was down today, falling past her shoulders in loose waves, that light wheat color catching the sun that came through the front window. She was wearing a pale yellow skirt that moved when she walked, and sandals that made a quiet sound on the old wood floor. She came straight to the counter this time. No browsing the shelves first. Same as last time, she said. Black coffee, no sugar. You remembered. It has been 4 days, I said. I am not that forgetful. She smiled at that. A real one, not polite. She took her coffee and her bag, and went back to the same chair by the window, and I went back to pretending I had other things to think about. She stayed for nearly 3 hours. At some point, I brought her a second coffee without her asking, and she looked up from her book and said thank you in a voice that was quiet enough that it felt like it was only meant for me. She came back that Thursday too, and the following Tuesday and Thursday after that. By the third week, it had stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like something else, something neither of us was in any hurry to name. We talked more each time. At first it was easy things. Books, the city, the particular quality of Charleston in June when the heat arrives slowly and the gardens are still holding on. She had come to Charleston 8 months ago for an editorial position at a small regional publishing house called Palmetto Press. She read manuscripts, corresponded with authors, worked with a team of 4 in a narrow office 2 blocks from the waterfront. She liked the work, she said, but there was something about it that felt provisional, like she was very good at helping other people say what they meant while her own voice was quietly waiting somewhere she had not found yet. I understood that more than I told her. She asked about me too. I was more honest than I usually am with people. I told her about leaving school, about the gap between the life I had planned and the one I was living, about the essays in a folder on my laptop that I had not opened in over a year. She did not offer reassurances or tell me it was not too late, the way people do when they are more comfortable with the situation than you are. She just listened, nodded slowly, and said, "You still talk about books like someone who never stopped caring about them. That is not a small thing, Everett." It was a small thing to say. I thought about it for 3 days. What I did not tell her, not then, was about my father, about the way his death had not just taken him, but had taken the shape of my family with him, leaving behind something unrecognizable. My mother had spent the first year almost entirely silent, moving through the house in a way that reminded me of someone learning to live in a foreign country. My brother Nate had responded differently, louder, harder, out later and later until one night, he did not come home at all, and we found him the next morning at a friend's house with glassy eyes and a story that did not hold together. That had been 2 years ago. Nate was better now mostly. He was 19, working a construction job outside Columbia, calling on Sundays with a voice that sounded more like his own each week. My mother had found a kind of equilibrium, though she still kept my father's reading glasses on the kitchen table as if he had just stepped out and might be back for them. I had not told anyone most of this. It was the kind of history that is easier to carry quietly than to explain. But one Thursday evening, close to closing time, when the shop was empty and the light outside had gone that deep Charleston gold, Eden looked up from her book and said something that caught me off guard. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask," I said. I reserve the right not to answer. She smiled briefly. "Fair. Then, you get a look sometimes. When you think no one is watching. Like you were somewhere else entirely. Not unhappy exactly, but carrying something." I was quiet for a moment. The ceiling fan turned overhead. "My father died 3 years ago," I said. "Right around when I left school. It sort of reorganized everything." She held my gaze. I'm sorry, Everett. It was a while ago. That doesn't always matter. There was a pause that was not uncomfortable. My family had some of that too, she said then quietly. Reorganization. The kind that changes the shape of things without asking permission. She did not say more than that. Not yet. But something in the way she said it told me there was a much longer sentence behind it, one she was not ready to finish. I did not push. I just nodded and started closing out the register, and she gathered her things slowly, like she was not quite ready to leave either. At the door she paused and turned back. Same time Thursday? I'll have the coffee ready, I said. She held my gaze for just a second longer than necessary. Then she pushed open the pale blue door and stepped out into the warm evening, her white skirt catching the last of the light as she turned down the street. I stood behind the counter for a long moment after she was gone. There was something she was not telling me. I could feel it the way you feel a weather change before it arrives, a shift in pressure, a stillness that means something is coming. I did not know what it was, but I knew, with a certainty I could not explain, that it was connected to whatever had brought her back to Charleston after years away. And I had a feeling, quiet but insistent, that it was also connected to me, though I could not yet say how. I turned off the lights and locked the door and walked home through streets that smelled like jasmine and warm pavement. Whatever it was, Thursday felt very far away. Thursday came with low clouds and the smell of rain that never quite arrived. I had the coffee ready at 10 past 10, black, no sugar, and set it on the small table by the window out of habit before she had even walked through the door. When the bell rang at 10:15 and she came in, she looked at the cup already waiting and said nothing for a moment. Just looked at it, then at me, with an expression I could not fully read. You did that on purpose, she said. I did it out of routine, I said. There is a difference. She sat down and wrapped both hands around the cup and looked out the window at the gray street. Something was different about her today. She was quieter than usual, more contained, the way a person gets when they have been thinking hard about something since before they woke up. Her hair was pinned back neatly, that pale wheat color a little softer in the clouded light. She had on a white blouse with small buttons down the front and a skirt the color of sage, and she looked, as she always did, as though she had put herself together with care, but today the care had a different quality to it. Like armor, almost. I let her have the quiet. I restocked the pastry case and wrote the day's specials on the chalkboard and tried not to watch her too closely. After about 20 minutes, she said, without looking away from the window, "My mother called me last night." I waited. We do not talk often. She turned her cup slowly in her hands. There was a period, a long one, when we did not talk at all. I came around the counter and leaned against the bookshelf nearest to her, close enough to hear her clearly, but not so close that it felt like pressure. The shop was empty. The ceiling fan turned. What happened? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father left when I was 14. Not dramatically. He just stopped being present, and then one day he was gone. New city, new life, the occasional birthday card with a check inside that felt worse than nothing." She paused. My mother never really recovered from it. Not in the way you move on and build something new. More in the way you stop expecting things to be good and learn to manage with less. That sounds lonely, I said. For both of you. It was. She finally looked at me. I think I spent most of college and my 20s running from anything that looked like that pattern. Any situation where I cared too much about someone who might just reduce themselves to nothing. She said it carefully, like she had thought about this particular sentence for a long time. I got very good at keeping things light, keeping myself at a certain distance. The rain that had been threatening all morning finally began, soft and steady against the front window, streaking the glass in long lines. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, not coldly, genuinely. She looked at me for a moment. "Because I think you understand it. And because," she stopped, started again, "because I have been coming here every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 weeks, and I am not coming for the coffee, Everett. I think you know that." I did know it. I had known it for at least 4 of those 6 weeks. But hearing her say it plainly, in that quiet, steady voice of hers, was something different from knowing it privately. "Your mother's call," I said, after a moment. "What did she want?" Eden looked back at the window. "She told me my father has been trying to reach me." She said it flatly, the way you say something you have been rehearsing. "He is sick. Not immediately, not an emergency, but the kind of sick that has a timeline. He wants to see me." The rain came a little harder. "And," I said, "and I do not know what I want." Her voice was even, but something underneath it was not. Part of me thinks I owe him nothing. He made his choices, he has lived his life, and I built mine without him. But another part, she shook her head slowly. Another part keeps thinking about the last time I saw him. I was 17. He had come back through town briefly, I don't even know why. We sat in a diner, and he told me I had his eyes. Like that was supposed to be enough. Like he had given me something valuable just by being the reason I existed. I was quiet for a moment. Outside, a couple hurried past under a shared umbrella. What do his eyes look like? I asked. She blinked, looked at me. Then something in her face shifted, the tightness loosened just a fraction, and she gave a small, surprised half-laugh. Gray, she said. Very ordinary gray. Then he should have tried harder, I said. She laughed again, more fully this time, and pressed her fingers briefly over her mouth. Then the laughter settled, and she looked at me with something that was not quite gratitude, but was close to it. I never told anyone that story before, she said. The diner. The thing about the eyes. How did it feel? I asked. She thought about it honestly. Strange. And easier than I expected. I nodded. Outside, the rain softened again to something almost gentle. I almost told her then. About my own father. Not just the fact of his death, which I had mentioned before, but the rest of it. The way our family had come unstitched in the year that followed. The drawer in my mother's bedroom where she still kept his letters, tied with a piece of kitchen string. The conversation I'd had with Nate last winter, when he told me he didn't really remember Dad's voice anymore, and I didn't know what to say because I was afraid I was starting to forget it too. But I held it back. Not because I didn't trust her. I did, more than I had trusted anyone in a long time. I held it back because there was something important about the order of things. She had offered me something real today, something she had carried quietly and alone for years. It deserved to sit in the room for a while before I filled the space with my own weight. There would be time. She stayed until past noon that day. We talked about other things too. A manuscript she was working on at Palmetto Press, a novel by a first-time author from Georgia that she said reminded her of Carson McCullers in the best possible way. I told her about a short story I had written once, the one that had been published, and she asked me to find it and bring it next time. When she left, the rain had stopped. She paused at the door and turned back. She did this often, I had noticed, as if leaving took a second effort. Everett. Yeah. Thank you for not giving me advice. I didn't know what to say, I told her honestly. That was exactly right, she said. Then she pushed through the pale blue door and walked out into the washed clean street, her white skirt bright against the wet pavement, and I watched her go until she turned the corner and the street was just the street again. I stood at the counter for a long time after. I was thinking about father's, mine who was gone, hers who was trying to return from a distance that was his own making. I was thinking about the strange arithmetic of loss, how some absences are clean and final, and others keep sending letters. And I was thinking about Eden saying I am not coming for the coffee, and the particular way she had looked at me when she said it. Like she was not sure yet if that was brave or foolish. I was not sure either. But for the first time in 3 years, I found I did not mind not knowing. The following Saturday, she texted me. I did not even know she had my number until the message appeared. Then I remembered she had taken a photo of the shop's business card on her third visit, the one with the handwritten number Mrs. Patton had scrawled in the corner years ago. I had forgotten about it entirely. The message said, "Waterfront tonight. Night market. I don't want to go alone. Come with me." No question mark. Not quite a question, not quite a command. Somewhere in between, which was, I was learning, very Eden. I looked at the message for longer than necessary. Then I wrote back, "What time?" She sent an address and a time, 7 o'clock, and nothing else. The evening was warm and gold the way only a Charleston June can manage. The kind of warmth that does not press down on you but wraps around, easy and close, carrying jasmine and salt air in equal measure. The market ran along the waterfront, strings of lights between wooden stalls, the harbor dark and glittering beyond, the sound of a guitar somewhere toward the far end mixing with voices, and the smell of grilled oysters and sweet tea and things fried in butter. I found her near the entrance, standing at the edge of the crowd, looking out at the water. She was wearing a white skirt again, lighter than the ones she wore to the shop, something that moved in the harbor breeze, and a blouse the color of pale lavender, simple and clean, her hair down and loose across her shoulders in that wheat-colored wave that I had stopped pretending I did not notice. She was holding a paper cup of something and looking at the lights on the water with an expression that was almost peaceful. Almost. She heard me coming and turned, and her face did what it sometimes did, that small, unguarded opening, like a door moving on a hinge. "You came," she said. "You said you didn't want to go alone. I didn't think you'd actually come. Then why did you ask?" She looked at me for a moment. "Hope, I suppose." We walked slowly through the market the way you do when the destination is not the point. We looked at handmade things, pottery and woven baskets and jars of preserves with handwritten labels. We ate oysters standing up at a narrow counter, and she made a face at the first one and then ate 3 more. We drank sweet tea from paper cups and argued pleasantly about whether sweet tea was a flavor or just a habit, and she said it was a philosophy, and I said that was the most Charleston answer possible, and she laughed with her whole face. At some point, I cannot say exactly when, her hand found mine. It was not dramatic. She simply reached over as we were walking, and her fingers settled into the spaces between mine as if they had always intended to be there, and neither of us said anything about it, and we kept walking. I thought about what she had told me on Thursday. About her father, the diner, the gray eyes. About keeping people at a distance because caring too much had once meant being left with nothing. I thought about how much courage it takes to reach for someone's hand when your whole history has been teaching you not to. We walked until the market thinned, and we found a quieter stretch of railing overlooking the harbor. The guitar had stopped. The lights of the water moved with the current. We stood there for a while, her shoulder against mine, not saying anything, and it was one of those silences that is fuller than most conversations. Then she said, "I called my mother back this morning. I waited. I told her I would think about seeing him. My father." She kept her eyes on the water. I didn't say yes, but I stopped saying no. That felt like enough for today. "That sounds right," I said. "I don't know what I want from it. I don't even know what I would say to him." She paused. "I think I'm afraid that if I see him I'll feel nothing. And I'm equally afraid I'll feel everything. Both of those are survivable," I said. She turned and looked at me. "How do you know?" And then I told her. All of it, properly, for the first time. I told her about my father dying on a Tuesday in October, 3 years ago, between my morning class and my afternoon one. A phone call in the hallway outside the library that rearranged every assumption I had about time. I told her about coming home and finding my mother already somewhere unreachable, and Nate going sideways in the months that followed, and the particular loneliness of being the one who stayed functional because there was no other option. I told her about the night I found Nate at his friend's house, the state of him, the conversation in the car on the way home, the way he had cried, and said he didn't know how to miss someone who had been so quiet in life that his absence sounded almost the same as his presence. I had never said that last part out loud before. It surprised me when it came out. Eden was very still beside me. Her hand had tightened in mine. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not the 3 years ago sorry. The actual kind." "I know," I said. "I can tell the difference." We were quiet again. Somewhere behind us the market was still going, voices and light, but where we stood it was almost private. "Can I tell you something strange?" she said. "Go ahead." "I moved to Charleston 8 months ago. I told myself it was the job, and it was, mostly, but I grew up 2 hours from here. My mother still lives there. And when the position at Palmetto Press came up, I applied within 20 minutes of seeing the listing, and I didn't ask myself too hard why." She paused. "I think I was moving towards something. Or back towards something. I just didn't know what yet." I looked at her. "And now?" She looked back. Her eyes in the harbor light were serious and warm, and something else I did not have a word for yet. "Now I think I might know." I did not say anything. I did not need to. I turned toward her, and she turned toward me, and the space between us closed the way it had been closing, slowly, for 6 weeks, and then she kissed me. Soft and unhurried. Her free hand coming up to rest lightly against my jaw, the harbor breeze moving her hair. When she pulled back, she kept her forehead against mine. "I've been thinking about doing that since the second Tuesday," she said quietly. "What stopped you?" "I told you. I have a history of keeping my distance." "And now?" She pulled back just enough to look at me properly. "Now I'm tired of it." We stayed at the railing until the market closed and the lights began coming down one string at a time. I walked her back through the emptying streets, her hand still in mine, our steps slowing the closer we got to her building because neither of us was in a hurry to arrive. At her door, she turned and looked at me with that expression I was beginning to recognize, The one where she was thinking something through and deciding whether to say it. Everett. Yeah. My father's name is Warren. He lives in Asheville now. She said it carefully, like she was setting something fragile down on a surface she was not sure would hold. I'm going to go see him. Next month, I think. I don't know how it will go. Do you want company? I asked. She studied me for a moment. I don't know yet. Then, softer. But I like that you asked. She kissed me once more at the door, brief and certain, the kind that is a beginning and knows it, and then she went inside. I walked home through streets that smelled like jasmine and warm salt and rain-cleaned stone, and somewhere between her door and mine I understood something I had been circling for weeks, that what was happening between us was not simple and not without weight, and that the weight was exactly what made it worth something. Her father was out there in Asheville with a timeline and unfinished business. Mine was 3 years gone with things still unsaid between us. Nate was rebuilding himself slowly in Colombia. My mother still kept reading glasses on the kitchen table. All of it was real. All of it was ours to carry. But for the first time in a long while, I did not feel like I was carrying it alone. August arrived the way it always does in Charleston, without asking permission. The heat thickened, the tourists thinned, and the city settled into that particular late summer stillness that the locals know and the visitors never quite see. The gardens went a little ragged at the edges. The harbor air tasted of salt and something almost autumnal underneath, a suggestion of change that had not arrived yet, but was already on its way. Eden and I had spent July the way I imagine people spend time when they are being careful with something valuable, slowly, honestly, with attention. Long evenings on her porch 2 blocks from the waterfront, drinking iced tea and reading in companionable quiet. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market on Marion Square, arguing about peaches. Late afternoons at Tidewater Books when the last customers had gone and the ceiling fan turned, and we sat on opposite sides of the small table by the window with our books and said very little and meant a great deal. We talked about everything, eventually. Not all at once. The way real things unfold. In layers, each conversation opening a door that the next one walked through. She told me more about her childhood, about growing up in a house where her mother had loved her fiercely but quietly, in the way of someone conserving energy for the long winter, about learning early to be self-sufficient in the emotional sense, not cold, but sealed, tending her own interior life with the discipline of someone who had learned not to depend on the lights staying on. About the years of her 20s when she had been brilliant at her work and careful with everyone who got close, and how that had left her, at 27, with a career she was proud of and a persistent hollow feeling she was only beginning to name. I told her the rest of mine too, the things I had held back even on the night at the harbor, about the version of my father that I missed, not the idea of him but the specific, ordinary man. The way he used to leave the sports section folded on the kitchen table even though no one else in the house cared about it. The particular sound of his car in the driveway. The last conversation we had, 2 days before he died. Unremarkable, 3 minutes about nothing. And how I had spent a long time afterward wishing I had known it was the last one so I could have made it count, before I slowly understood that its ordinariness was the point. That was who he was. That was us. Eden listened to all of it. She had a quality I had not encountered much before, a way of receiving what you told her that made you feel heard without feeling managed. She did not reframe or redirect. She just held it. And then, on the second Saturday of July, she drove to Asheville. She went alone. I had offered again, and she had thought about it for a long time before she said, gently, carefully, that this was something she needed to do in her own skin first. I understood. I drove her to her car that morning and she kissed me at the curb and said she would call when she was on her way back. She called at 9:30 that night. I picked up on the second ring. How was it? I asked. A pause. Long enough that I stood up from my chair. He's thinner than I remembered, she said finally. And he apologized. Not well. It was halting and insufficient, and I could tell he had rehearsed it and still lost the thread halfway through. Another pause. But he meant it. I could tell he meant it. And I didn't forgive him, she said. Not yet. Maybe not ever completely. But I told him I would come back. In a few months. And that felt. She stopped. It felt like the honest thing. Not the easy thing. The honest one. Those are usually different, I said. Yes. Her voice was steadier now, the particular steadiness of someone who has done something hard and come out the other side intact. I'm 2 hours out. I'll be back before midnight. I'll be up, I said. Everett. Yeah. Thank you for letting me do that alone. Thank you for coming back. A brief silence, warm and close even through the phone. See you soon, she said. She was at my door at 11:40. I had coffee waiting, not black this time, something warmer, with a little cinnamon the way I had once heard her say she used to take it, before some things changed. She came in and sat at my kitchen table and wrapped her hands around the cup and did not say very much for a while, and I sat across from her and did not require her to. After a while she looked up. I think I understand something now that I didn't this morning. What's that? That you can love someone and be angry at them and grieve them and still not owe them your whole self. She said it slowly, like she was finding the shape of it as she spoke. That you get to decide what the relationship is from here. You don't have to accept the version they left you with. I thought about my father, about the reading glasses on my mother's table, about Nate's voice on Sunday phone calls, getting more like his own each week. Yeah, I said. I think that's right. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. We sat like that for a long time. September came. The air changed. The petunias in Tidewater Books' window boxes finally gave up, and I replaced them with small chrysanthemums that Mrs. Patton said looked too funereal, and then admitted she liked. I had sent an email in August, nervously, half expecting silence, to Palmetto Press. They were looking for someone in acquisitions support, reading manuscripts, writing coverage, corresponding with authors. The pay was modest but honest. The work was exactly what I had quietly wanted for years without ever letting myself say so plainly. Eden had not pushed me toward it. She had simply asked, one evening, whether I had ever thought seriously about editorial work. I said I had thought about it the way you think about things you believe are not available to you. She looked at me with that particular expression of hers, patient, a little amused, slightly exasperated, and said, "Available means applied for." So I applied. I got the job. I will not pretend it was a transformation. I still had mornings when the weight of the last 3 years sat on my chest before I had even made coffee. Nate was still rebuilding, slowly and imperfectly. My mother still kept the reading glasses on the table. I had stopped wanting her to move them. Some griefs do not resolve. They just find a quieter place to live. But I woke up knowing where I was going. That changed the texture of everything else. We married the following June. A small ceremony, the way we both wanted, close friends, family, the harbor visible through the trees. Eden wore white and her hair was pinned up the way it had been that first Friday, that pale wheat color bright in the June light, with the same loose strands at her temples that I had noticed, and then told myself I had not noticed. My mother cried. Nate stood beside me and held himself together until the vows, and then did not, and I loved him for it. Mrs. Patton closed Tidewater Books for the afternoon and came with a bottle of something expensive and a card that said only, "About time. D. Patton." I put it in a drawer I intend to keep. 14 months later, our daughter was born. We named her June. For the month the bell above the door rang, and everything quietly shifted. I am nearly 30 now. I work in acquisitions at Palmetto Press, manuscripts and authors, and the long, careful work of helping a book become what it was trying to be. Some mornings I bring my reading to Tidewater Books and sit at the corner table by the window, the same table where Eden used to sit during those first weeks, waiting with her coffee and her book and whatever she was working up the courage to say. I always bring her a cup too. Black, no sugar. I set it beside her without a word, and she reaches for it without looking up, and for a moment the whole morning holds still. She went back to Asheville twice more. The second visit was harder than the first, and the third one was different in a way she described as, not peace exactly, more like the absence of war. She still does not know what her father will be to her in the end. She says she is trying to find out, honestly, without deciding in advance what the answer should be. I think that is one of the bravest things I have ever heard anyone say. My name is Everett. I am almost 30, though I still sometimes feel like the 27-year-old standing behind that counter with a damp rag and no clear plan, watching a woman in a white skirt browse the shelves and thinking, without knowing yet that I was thinking it, there is something important about to happen. I was right about that. I work with books now. I live in Charleston with a wife who tells me the truth and a daughter named after the month everything changed. My brother calls on Sundays. My mother is all right. The reading glasses are still on the table, and I have made my peace with them being there. For a long time I thought my life was a loop of coffee and quiet regret, a holding pattern I had settled into so gradually I had stopped noticing I was circling. Then one Friday at the beginning of June, a woman I had never quite finished knowing walked through a pale blue door, found a chair by the window, and slowly became the reason I stopped waiting for my real life to begin. She had her own weight to carry. So did I. We did not fix each other. That is not how it works, and we both knew better than to try. But we carried it together, honestly, and without pretending it was lighter than it was. That turned out to be enough. More than enough. It turned out to be everything. Thanks for watching. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories about love, resilience, and second chances.